Church, the oldest church in Pennsylvania. It is the second church that was founded in Pennsylvania, but the first church was up in Bristol, and it failed within about 4 years, right about the time this church was founded. That church was in operation from 1684 to 1688. This church started in 1688, January of 1688. This meeting house was not there then, not here then. This is the third meeting house. This meeting house was built in 1805, replacing the second meeting house, which was built in 1774. And that replaced one that was built in 1707, the first meeting house. So basically for the first 20 years of the church's existence, they met in people's houses, which isn't uncommon today when you start up a church at all, for people to meet in people's houses and members' houses. And when they get a large enough congregation and get their some funds together, they can build a meeting house or a church. The first one was also stone. All three of them were stone. The first one was about half the size of this one. They were all built on the same basic footprint, though larger. So this goes back to 1805. The graveyard itself goes back to 1692 with the burial of a man named Robert Duffield, whose son was one of the not charter members. The 12 charter members are right here. I'll get into them in a minute. But Benjamin Duffield, Robert's brother, became a member about 3 weeks after the church in 1688. His father is buried there. That is what kind of identifies the location of the meeting house later on, where the graveyard is. That is another frequent occurrence. People would get buried before they actually had a church to meet in, and they would necessarily build their church on that graveyard or on that lot near the graveyard. So that's what happened here. A half acre, a quarter acre was given to the church in 1692. The first time we see it is in 1696 on a deed. So say around 1692 for sure, to get Robert Duffield buried. And with that, that's over against the far wall there. That identifies where the church is going to go, where the meeting house is going to be built on this approximate acre and a half here. On this side of the street, we have another basically acre over there where the buses park. That's also church property. So 1683, November 1683 is really when things begin to happen. The Eaton family, George, John, and their sister Sarah Eaton, came from Wales. They were members of the Delau Baptist Church, Baptist Chapel, over in Wales, in Nantmill, Wales, near Radnorshire, in the county of Radnorshire. And they were being persecuted, as all Baptists were, as Quakers were at that time, and wanted to leave Wales in order to get the freedom of religion, or be free to worship as however they pleased. They left in August of 1683 to sail for Philadelphia, to Pennsylvania. They knew about Penn's openness to all religions. And they arrived in November, and by March, they arrived in Philadelphia in November 1683. By March of 1684, they were up in this area. Probably not right here. They were probably on Pennepack Creek. You all came in from that direction, so you haven't really gone over Pennepack Creek, but it's just down the hill here, and it's over beyond the tree line there. That's where the name comes from, obviously. Pennepack Creek is spelled with a Y, whereas the church is spelled with an E, which is the old spelling of Pennepack. Pennepack is a Lenape. The Delaware Indians their name for themselves was Lenape or Lenni Lenape. The word Pennepack comes from a village that they had down on the Delaware River, about 10 miles from here, down in Holmesburg. That village was named Pennepack, Pennepacka. And that's where the name Pennepack comes from. It means lake land. It's tidal down there, lots of water at high tide. The Eatons show up here with a man named Samuel Jones. Samuel Jones was also in the congregation Matthew Lau Baptist Church in Willow. Um, George Eaton had his wife Jane came with him. John Eaton was married, but his wife stayed over there and showed up a couple of months later, as far as we understand. So those are the four or five Welsh people that come. There are 12 founding members. 5 of them were Welsh. The next important person is John Watts, who will marry Sarah Eaton very shortly after the church is founded. It was founded in January of 1688. They married in February of 1688. John Watts is also a founding member. The Ashtons, Jane and Joseph Ashton, are members. They live further down in Lower Dublin Township. This is Dublin Township. This church is also known as Lower Dublin Baptist Church. This was the township was Lower Dublin. William Penn wanted to name Pennepack Creek Dublin Creek to entice Irishmen to get here. The township kept that name. The creek did not. It reverted back to Pennepack. A couple of other members. Baker was Irish. Fisher was an Englishman. I think that is all of them, with the exception of Keach, Elias Keach, who was the pastor. He was an English. He was from London. He was a young man, he was like 21. In London, well known for his hymns, and I think the younger Elias came over. He was the only member of his family to come over. He probably felt that he wanted to undoubtedly felt he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. He realized how that he would become an important citizen if he did that. I'm putting some words, I'm making some judgment here that I probably shouldn't make, but I think Elias Keach, and there's no doubt about it, Elias Keach did begin to preach as a Baptist minister without having been ordained, let alone, without having been baptized, let alone ordained. He was found out by admitting it himself on one of these preaching occasions. He was down in the city being a very, very small building, in 1686. But he was getting quite a reputation down there for his ability to preach. And he was up there preaching at one of these sessions when he suddenly realized his erroneous ways and pretty much broke down and pleaded guilty without anybody suggesting that he was, and admitted his false pretenses. He then came up this way, came up to the church there in Bristol, which was known as Cold Springs Baptist Church. Went up there, was baptized and ordained by the minister there, Thomas Dungan, who had come from Rhode Island. He was an older man, died in 1688. So Keach is now ordained, and there are enough people here, 12, 11 other than Keach, who are in need of a pastor to get their church going. And he agrees to that, and they met once before on another occasion up here earlier, say in October, September, and a couple of Watts was baptized at that time. I think the Ashtons were baptized at that time. But then in 1688, they formed the church. Where exactly, we don't know, but we do know that John Watts lived back that way, about half a mile on what is called Paul's Run, which is a major tributary of Pennepack Creek. And really at that time, these creeks, the surveying and the knowledge of exactly where these creeks were flowing wasn't that accurate. They could have considered that Pennepack Creek tributaries, and that would not be uncommon. So probably that's where the meeting, I'm thinking, that's where the meeting was, where the church was founded, about a half a mile from here. We know Watts lived there, along with Sarah, raised their family there, and I think many of those early meetings were taking place in that house, because the first meeting house is not until 1707. Watts, Keach leaves. He had enough of living out here in the sticks. He was a city guy. He went to Burlington, actually, Many of the churches around here, the churches of blossoming churches of Baptist churches, were missions or branches of this church. Pennepack was the main church. The Philadelphia church was part of Pennepack. The Burlington church, the Salem church, many churches. There weren't many, but that's about it, about 5 of them. Keats went over to Burlington, stayed there for about a year, still as the official pastor of this church, but he spent his time in the village of Burlington, which was about 5 years older than Philadelphia, had been in operation for about 5 years. So he then left Burlington, went back to England, married a young girl here by the name of Mary Moore, and left for England, stayed there. With that, John Watts became the pastor of the church, the second pastor. This is like 1690. Watts handled the Keithian Schism. I don't know if you're familiar with the Keithian Schism. That's where the Quaker meeting breaks up, split about 75-25, and they lost about 25% of their members, who George Keith had was of the opinion that there was not enough divinity given to Christ in the Quaker fold, and began to preach against that in the Quaker fold, and that caused a schism, a split in the church. Many of those people who split, called Keithian Quakers, were unable to Quaker church. They tried, but it failed, and many of those became members of Baptist churches, particularly this one. This was the only one. So Watts is in charge of letting these people join or not letting them join. I mean, he's diluting the Baptist preaching if he's allowing all these people who are only half convinced of Baptist teachings. This is a very delicate situation and a very important. This is really important what John Watts was able to accomplish, to keep the church strong and yet to allow these Quakers to come in, and the Quakers had a lot of money. Also, they were bodies. They were very organized. So that was a great asset for the Baptist church, but you had to be careful, as I say, of diluting the teachings of the Baptist church. Watts handled that wonderfully, and without him, we don't know what might have happened. Unfortunately, in 1702, about 12 years after he became pastor, he died of smallpox at the age of 42. He's buried out there. His gravestone is still legible today, 1702. It's an amazing gravestone, and it's kind of the gem of our fantastic graveyard that has some very, very old burials here. So John Watts keeps the church going, and very well. He still doesn't have. He's not teaching this. The meeting house, first one, wasn't built in 1707, so he never taught or preached at the meeting house. He was dead 5 years before the first meeting house. And then continue into the century. The Eatons are still very prominent. Not quite. John Eaton leaves and goes to Great Valley Baptist Church and becomes a prominent member there, as do his sons. George Eaton, one of the originals, has a lot of land here. He gave 2 acres, 3 acres to the church. That quarter acre over there was given by Samuel Jones, the other Welshman. And then over time, more Welshmen are coming in. This is the place to go, and the church grows, and it grows. And finally, in the later 18th century, another Samuel Jones shows up, and he is a pastor for almost 50 years, a very, very important person in the Baptist church. He was part of getting Brown University going, Hopewell, which was a precursor of Brown. Samuel Jones is very important. He was offered to become the president of that university, He chose to stay here at Pennepack Baptist, and he built this church, built this meeting house. He built it in 1774. He was the pastor at that time. And then about 30 years later, built this church in 1805. And then he passed away in 1811, I believe. Things kind of start to go downhill at that point. There's nobody else to really shine like Samuel Jones did. And then you go through the 19th century. This church, a new church, is built in Bustleton, which is the village here, a stone church, Lower Dublin Baptist Church, also known as Pennepack Baptist Church. They built a new church over there because people who lived in the village wanted to have a church near them, and that church was built in 1886. With that, this meeting house is no longer used. It was basically dormant for about 120 years until it started up again when they sold that church over there in 2006 and put money into this church, fixed it all up, painted it, got electricity in it. It had no electricity, it had no water, had no running water, and fixed it up, made the vestibule back there, and put this screen up here, audio-visual stuff. The marker went in 2007 that I know you may want to be showing to people because that tells the history right there. And then that church is sold in 2006, as I mentioned, and the money is put back into this church, into this meeting house, and they did a wonderful job, and we continue to, the church is still alive, though there are only about 12 members, maybe 10 on a given Sunday. So it's like many churches, it is failing, but they are very dedicated, particularly the Unruh family, who are caretakers of the land and of the church. Tim on the property. Very, very dedicated people. I'm a member of the Historical Foundation. I'm not a member of the church. Should the church fail, the foundation will take over and keep things going. We already meet here. Historic group meets here every Wednesday, one Wednesday of the month, except with COVID we haven't been, but we'll get back to it. So it's becoming a central part of Northeast Philadelphia history and meeting and talking about Northeast Philadelphia history. So it will continue, but right now the church is still active and has been since 1688. We will be celebrating our 334th anniversary in June. We celebrate every first Sunday in June with Pennepack Day. And there you go.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.